sex in movies is a very interesting subject because I feel like movies are so sexless these days.
Yeah.
You know, and those scenes have been done so many different ways that we were really, and it was such a crucial element. You really have to have Gary Johnson get thrust into a journey, you know, and fall for someone so hard that he makes every illogical decision. The most logical guy makes every illogical decision. So the sex of this movie plays a real important catalyst to waking up and finding himself in circumstances that he couldn't have even imagined.
Glenn, you and Adria have like such like a sizzling chemistry in this from like that first scene with you two, and it like made me think, when was the last time I felt that sort of instantaneous chemistry? And it probably was George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez in the trunk of that car and out of sight. And, like, Could you talk a little bit about kind of developing that chemistry with Adria and how you two were able to forge that romance, because it is like such a compelling part of the film?
I mean, in script form, Rick and I were talking about, you know, this character sort of theoretically, this part of the article about Gary Johnson actually, you know, meeting up with a woman as a fake hitman to set her up, or essentially she's about to try to hire him to kill her husband, and he sees the best in her and decides to let her off, and sort of a relationship that comes from it. And I think one of the interesting things as we were writing it, knowing that we were gonna have to cast this thing, which is we almost wrote an impossible character to cast.
Yeah.
It's such a hard thing when you sit there and you go, this actress has to be absolutely everything. You have to be willing to completely change your life and your personality and divorce yourself from every piece of logic that defines you. You know, you immediately, the audience has to get it. Just like, you know, Jennifer Lopez and Out of Sight, like, you know, it just has to be instantaneous. And sitting down with Adria, you know, Rick said it, you know, early on. He said it on many movies he's done, but it's like, it either is or it isn't. Chemistry is not one of those things that you can manufacture. If one person is determined not to have chemistry with you, it's just not gonna happen.
And you can have two charismatic performers and still be kind of drain it out of them if you don't nurture that atmosphere.
Yeah,
you can't create it, but you can elevate it.
Yeah.
You know, you can situate it where it maximizes itself, I think.
Well, one thing that Rick does also is create an incredibly comfortable atmosphere. You know, he brought Adria into that process, and we both brought her into that process in terms of the writing room to really have a lot of accountability for that character and really put her ideas into that character, and we were really lucky for how she breathed all this life into it. But I think what it also does is a sense of trust. It's a sense of collaboration. It's not, hey, act out these sort of scenes. It's like Adria was the one who really took all those romantic scenes and really took them to a whole new level. You know, she was the one who was like, oh no, we need to take it further, and we're just like, okay. When you have a filmmaker that gives you a long leash, you know, that allows you to really, you know, again, to put your own stamp on it, it's a really empowering feeling, and it makes those scenes very comfortable.
In my head, I certainly had Lady Eve and, you know, all the classic screwballs. Bringing Up Baby, you know, where the guy's kind of nerdy. But this is different. He's hiding he is nerdy, the audience knows that, but she doesn't. She sees Ron, you know, so everything's a little skewed in this. You know, we have those same tropes, but they're in a different order, they're in a different way. And I mean, we talked about it the earliest script phase. It's like, well, what if is she setting him up? You know, we went down that path a little bit. Like, it's like, but then you go, that's been done. You know, they lived under the Hays Code back then. They had to do that. You had to pay for your sins. Like, we're a pretty free agent now. What if they're actually a couple that's meant to be? Like, we're talking a great love story. That's what took us from noir to screwball comedy. Then it becomes something else. You never leave behind the noir thriller part. That's the genre that hovers over the entire thing. But we're sort of deconstructing that. So, I don't know. We had fun playing with that.
Rick is like, I think, our greatest chronicler of time in cinema. I was curious if you could speak a little bit about seeing those films that you've made with him in terms of not only your kind of evolution as an artist, but also just like your evolution as like a human being.
That's a very good question. Like, that's a really good question, because even that one scene in Fast Food Nation, I remember I broke my arm, ironically, playing baseball right before that movie. I had to call Rick and tell him that I had a broken arm. I now had a cast, and he said, you know, there was always a guy in high school that had a cast. I like that. That's maybe even better, you know? And you're like, and Rick's just zen. He just goes with the flow, and sometimes what you realize is, like, by not trying to force something, it ends up having more verisimilitude, more life, you know, in it. And I think on Everybody Wants Some, that was such a coveted movie in Hollywood. I remember every guy in Hollywood was going out for this thing, and I was just so desperate to be back in the trenches with Rick. But that was an interesting one in which I think you're right. Like, that's a moment in my life where I was coming out of that phase, and Rick is an athlete. He played baseball in 1980, and this was about that sort of moment in his life. And that was sort of like a very similar moment in my life where all these guys, especially everybody on that team, you know, no one really knew who anybody was. There was sort of this team sport.
Yeah, you got thrown together.
Yeah.
Let's try to win a championship.
And it was so exciting for us all to be there. So it all felt like a team sport. And I think that will go down as like maybe the most exciting thing that's ever happened to me, because I get to be with, you know, one of my heroes on his ranch, and we're baking up this script together, and we're just having the best time with the greatest group of guys. But it felt like being in college. It felt like being on a baseball team.
I made them all live together in the bunkhouse, even though at this point, a lot of them are older. A couple were even married, and, you know, life had... But like, no, we're college kids. Yeah, that was the great team effort. And Glenn, as natural, he kind of fell into like the team leader because of his role. He's a senior on the team. You just took on that team leader for sure, and which is different than not necessarily the best player on the team. That was McReynolds. Yeah. But you know, he's a little dickish. You're there. You're the freshman like you. He tells them to buzz off. You know, but you're like the cool guy. I don't know. Finn is the best character because he's just so. That was how we talk about Adria, what she had to do for that. Finn was like that too, athlete but really smart, really well read. Just quick. And Glenn came in, I was like, holy shit, when did Glenn like grow up to be this guy? I hadn't seen him in a few years. And so it was like, wow. So we were off to the races. We just had such a great creative time. And that team environment too, it's great, that dynamic. You get everybody involved. And the leadership sort of starts at the top. That team, everybody was in it for the right reasons. We all, just special, very special group.
Well, I think also just like our collaboration, really started on that movie. Like I just remember so many guys, it's like, look, Rick never makes anyone feel bad about pitching an idea, but everybody started pitching me the ideas to pitch to Rick, because like we really had like a great shorthand. And I remember just feeling like, oh, okay, this is such a great partnership. I always saw the movie that you were trying to make, you know what I mean? And I could like kind of tell the guys, hey, I don't think that's gonna work. Like maybe tweak it a little bit, or something like that. I feel like this is the first time Rick and I feel like, contemporaries a little bit more on this one. Like I felt like with Everybody Wants Some, I felt like, I was still a kid,
you're college, I'm like the old professor or something at that. I don't know what I am. No, I was head coach. I was head coach, and you guys were the team. That was kind of I accept that role.
Yeah, this felt like a true partnership.
Yeah,
we were in at the
absolutely.
I got to the end of the production and I go, because we were working till late at night, and then we'd write and we'd rewrite and we'd rehearse and we'd talk stuff out and
all weekend. Yeah,
I mean nonstop. Rick and I were like literally basically roommates during this movie. And then I got to the end of the production and I said, Rick, man, I'm a pretty hard worker, but you nearly destroyed me on this movie, man. You drove me to the ground. And he's like, man, you nearly drove me into the ground.
I was waiting for one of us was going to give out first, but neither of us did. We were just determined to not ever lose a step. So yeah, it was like, wow.